Logan, I am sick of Europeans talking down to us Americans, saying that they have the best roads, the best riders, the coolest bikes. Look, we get it. You get some bikes we don't get over here. But let me tell you, you're not the only place with twisty roads and nice scenery. Have you ever heard of a state called California?
I'll raise you one. You ever heard of a state called Nebraska?
God's country over there.
Nothing like slapping it up through some cornfields to really feel alive.
That's right, that's right. Now look, American riders, European riders, relations perhaps have never been frostier than they are today, but we're gonna bridge the gap. We're gonna celebrate our differences, and we're gonna talk through how these two specimens of the two-wheeled world are different and maybe similar. Producer Logan has cooked up some beautiful specs and data for us to sift through. Talk me through what makes the European rider so unique.
Sure. So starting right from the top, if you look at total registered motorcycles. So for the United States, we're looking at 8.9 million in 2023. You might think 8.9 million, not a bad number, but wait till we get a load of this. Europe in 2023 had 38 million registered motorcycles. Granted, that does include mopeds and scooters, but still motorcycles nonetheless.
I'm not a statistician, Logan, but that is a larger number than 8.9 million.
It is larger, almost maybe 4 times as large,
Yeah.
if my approximate math is correct, but it doesn't stop there. Even though the US has significantly less registered motorcycles, get a load of this, significantly higher crash fatalities. We hate to see it, but it's written here on the web. The stats don't lie.
It's almost like giving 19-year-olds unfettered access to leader bikes is not a great idea.
Well, pump the brakes. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. So for every 100,000 registered motorcycles in the US, there are 67 deaths. So not looking too great. In Europe, on the other hand, for every 100,000 registered motorcycles, there's about 20 to 25. So significantly less, half as much, you could say.
Yeah.
While still having 4 times as many registered motorcycles.
Logan, I thought we were going to celebrate the differences, bridge the divide, but it turns out the numbers you're giving me just make Europeans seem like God-tier riders and Americans seem like we just crash into the back of the local Tesla.
I think it might be more nuanced than that.
Okay.
So we're going to dig in a little bit deeper. Starting off the bat, just why do we ride? Why do you ride?
Well, I mean, as an American, the sense of freedom, baby. I get on my motorcycle, get wherever I want to go, and I get to do wheelies while I'm going there.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my primary motivation.
I mean, I can definitely relate with the sense of freedom, but I, on the other hand, I commute to work on a motorcycle. I use it for utility. I use it to go to the grocery store, the pet store. Maybe you could say I'm a little bit more European than you.
It's possible. It's possible. You've never even ridden in Europe, though. Or
I've never even been to Europe. I've never had a reason to. Tell me why I need to go to Europe. We got everything I need right here in the US. You can't make me go. I'm not going.
I have a feeling that the next press event we get invited to that's in Europe, I'm sending producer Logan over there because I am a boring dad now and I pretty much have to stay home more than I'd like sometimes. But I've ridden all around the world and I've seen some of this stuff firsthand, man. I've seen these riders being a little bit more responsible, a little bit better trained. There's just a difference in culture for Europe. Like I said, the 19-year-olds don't get access to leader bikes over there.
And you know me, I'm a history buff. I always like going back in time, getting to the root cause of things. And that, kind of stems back to World War II, the rise of motorcycling in both Europe and America, but for drastically different reasons. Post-war Europe, war-torn, economically depressed, the shambles of ancient cities crumbled. Motorcycles were cheap, cost-effective, easy to get around, and allowed people urban mobility in post-war Europe. Alternatively, in the US, motorcycling rose in popularity also, but for completely different reasons. Servicemen, people that fought in the war, came home, were looking for a sense of adventure, excitement. They're like, how can I get that same rush, that same sense of kinship with my brothers? Maybe the origin of the brother thing.
Maybe.
How do I get the same sense of kinship? And they landed on motorcycles. They rode motorcycles overseas. Harley Davidsons were popular. That name became iconic and synonymous with the rebellion, the freedom. Motorcycling was growing popularity at the same time, but for completely different reasons. And I think that sort of evolved in each area over the last, almost 75 years?
Yeah, I've always said this where motorcycles fit the landscape that they're in. It's why if you were to go to Houston, you only see stretched leader bikes ripping on the highways. There's nothing else to do there, right? You go to a nice, beautiful forested area, you're gonna see lots of dirt bikes, lots of ADVs, right? You go to Europe, the streets are narrower, things are more cobblestoney, things are a little bit older. The bikes and the riders fit the environment that they're in. And as Logan said, over 75 years of culture and history in these places, they're gonna end up with motorcycles that fit that market. And that's why we see a lot of mopeds and scooters in Europe.
For sure. And why you see, some of the 125s and stuff, of course, that has to do with the licensing system as well. Which, what better time than the present? Let's discuss the licensing system. What do you think about a tiered licensing system?
So I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see it here in the US. I've spoken to a lot of people in a lot of different organizations that have been lifelong motorcyclists that would also like to see it. But it's a balancing act here in the US where we have the unfortunate side of the cultural element where people say, my freedoms cannot be impinged, right? No matter the benefit for society. And so it kind of ends up this weird thing where it's like you want more people on motorcycles. You don't want to add barriers to people to get a bike, right? But at the same time, I think we've seen the data prove out that a tiered system keeps people safer and just has less deaths on the road.
Yeah, because I think, playing devil's advocate, I could say, do you think a stricter licensing system in America or stricter education would result in less riders here? But as we see based off the stats, there's significantly more riders in Europe, you know what I mean? So I think, it proves if the system is balanced and the education is encouraging and the culture is excited about it, the extra steps, those extra barriers to entry seem maybe less daunting, less infringing on your freedom to just get out there and ride. So
I think one of the factors we don't think about very much in respect to American versus European riders, Logan, is the fact that there are so many different modes of transportation in Europe.
That's true.
A lot of these cities are connected by buses, by trains, by walkable and bikeable areas, which we just view here as reprehensible to the human existence. If you don't drive your F-2500 to the local job that you have that's 2 miles away, you are not a corn-fed American.
Nope.
That's not the way we do things here. And so I think that people getting motorcycles and mopeds there, it probably is because owning a car is heinously expensive. You can't park them anywhere and you can't really fit them anywhere. You know?
I mean, very true. Yeah, the American landscape is very much built for big, hefty vehicles, whether those be stretch Busas, Harley Davidsons, F-250s. Bigger is better. There's that culture of excess. And there's some merit to that to an extent, right? Like, I like big, silly trucks. I don't own one.
I have one. I have a big, silly truck.
You're really disparaging the trucks as a truck owner. And I'm defending them. But
one of the worst. I have a Ram 1500. I'm like, I got my DUI. I got my tramp stamp. I mean, mine has the weird cowboy stitching thing on it
the
too.
True Religion jean interior.
It was the trim package that I wanted. Unfortunately, it came with it. But you just don't see stuff like that in Europe. The European mind cannot comprehend
it'd be like
owning such a big truck.
Giving Carolina Reaper hot sauce to a Victorian peasant.
It burst into flames.
And so a little bit more specific, the licensing system is based on age, experience, like hours of training. Do you know a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so in general, it's a combination of either age, experience, or having already a previous license. So I believe, don't quote me on this, we made a whole video on the A1, A2 tiered licensing system, I think several times here on Yami Noob. But basically the way it works is if you're under 18, you're limited to 125s. There's a power to weight ratio. I think between 18 to 24 years of age, there's a A2 system that you're limited to I think 48 horsepower. That's why we often talk about here on the channel the A2 bike system. That's why your Ninja 500s, your Aprilia RS 457s, they're all around 48 horsepower because they have to comply for that market. And then I believe if you have the license or you're above 24 years old, some combination of the two, you can get whatever you want. Okay. So they basically make it so that until your prefrontal cortex is developed, you can't go and get a super powerful motorcycle. That's basically it.
Communists.
Absolute communists.
Communism. But what's interesting too is, so it's not ostensibly difficult to either by time or training, get some of these larger displacement bikes, but we still see a massive popularity in smaller bikes, right? I think there's a lot of more kind of utilitarian motorcyclists that they aren't on the forums, they aren't watching the YouTube videos, they're not watching MotoGP, they just ride a motorcycle, usually a small displacement bike to get to and from work, to and from the store. And I think that's really interesting too from a cultural perspective is how foreign of a concept. Honda tried to do it a million times worldwide of attracting the urban or the suburban housewife to ride a motorcycle, and it's just never fully caught on in the States. But I think it's kind of fascinating to think about. If our grannies were riding a WR 250 to the crochet, the knitting shop or whatever.
I feel like they do that in Japan. They're just like big chilling on their scooters and stuff. The other thing that's funny about that too, Logan, is people in Europe in general have lower wages than here in the United States. One thing that people talk a lot about is like the GDP per capita in Mississippi is the same as people living in the UK. But the difference is they have lots of access to public transit, walkable places, all that sort of thing. But for a lot of people, buying a motorcycle is an expensive thing in Europe. Whereas here in America, there's kind of this stigma where like, if you don't own a car, you're poor, right? Like there's this idea here in America that like, in order to achieve status, you need a very big fancy vehicle. That's a way to show your wealth, where in places that are more walkable, it doesn't really matter that much. And so people just get utilitarian, cheaper forms of transport. They don't care.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense too. Yeah, it's very much a culture of utility versus, for pardon my French, flex offender culture, you know, status seeking
Why
behavior.
else live in America? That's the whole point of being here.
Freedom, counterculture, we make the best movies, we make the best TV shows, diversity of landscape, diversity of culture. I love America. I mean, there's tons of things to hate, but I love America.
I love America too, honestly. Yeah, I criticize it because I love it and would like to see it be better. But yeah, I think the one tenet of this place though is like, get rich or die trying.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And,
like,
and that's what we see based on like the fatality statistics, right? Like all these things seem seemingly innocuous. It's silly, it's excessive, maybe it's wasteful. But at the end of the day, people are losing their lives because of this culture of motorcycling. It's very fascinating. And again, on the direct next segment here, just a culture and gear, right? Obviously in a lot of countries in Europe, forgive me for generalizing, understand it's a large place, but again, I've never been, so it might as well not even exist. Gear is either, you know, ubiquitous or even like legally mandatory, right? Helmets, of course, being legally required, right?
Yeah, and here in the United States, many states do not require a helmet. I personally don't agree with that. That's just my personal belief. I think everyone should wear a helmet, and I think we see better outcomes whenever a helmet is mandated by law. And it is like that way in most countries in Europe, as far as I understand.
And what's cool about that too is like, because of the necessary safety measures that gear and helmets have to meet, it as a whole is like raises the gear industry, right? Like gear is increasingly becoming safer, more accessible, like all this technology stuff is trickling down to where, you can get fully kitted out in like ECE rated gear for, you know, a couple $100 if you know where to look, you know, and that's pretty cool. And I think if it wasn't for European standards for safety and things like that, everyone would just be rocking, you know, assless chaps.
Yeah, DOT lids are not necessarily
like the
what you want to go
cap
for.
ones. Once a week I'll see someone wearing the like China baseball cap helmet.
Yes.
And I always say, hell yeah, brother. And all these kind of lead into one another, so we're kind of blasting through, but back to the culture of motorcycling, it being more utilitarian and a little bit more ubiquitous and accepted, and it's not just diehard enthusiasts or riders riding motorcycles, it's, you know, everybody, average Joes, because it's an easy, cost-effective way to get around. And with that, lane filtering is, you know, not only is it legal, but it's to be expected, right?
Yes, and different places have different rules and kind of different standards of lane filtering. Riding in Italy is very different than riding in the UK, for example, not only because you ride on the different sides of the roads, of course, but like Italian traffic and how they filter and merge, very different than how you do it in the UK, very different than Spain. I think one of the craziest places I've ridden, actually, it wasn't in Europe, it was in Morocco. There were no rules at all. You just made your way through it. You felt like a little fish in a big school of other fish. And in Europe, it can definitely feel that way when you ride there. You're like, I just need to, like, wherever you can fit, you just make it fit and you just make it work.
Right. And do you think lane filtering, the acceptance of it and it as an encouraged and safe and appropriate behavior is indicative or symbolic of different social values of, like, you know, elevating everybody, you know, benefits the whole, right?
I have this conversation maybe once a month with people here in Austin because I'll get a honk.
Because you get pulled over?
Well, I got pulled over once for lane filtering, which I felt was unfair, but I'll still do it. I don't care. I break the rules, Logan. I'm just a rebel without a cause. But I think that if people understood that it's not cheating the system, you're not cutting in line, you're making traffic better for everybody, then maybe more people will ride. Because, like, honestly, from Yamanube HQ to where I live, depending on traffic, it can be upwards of 45 minutes sometimes,
for sure.
You know, if I'm in the big dumb truck that I own. But if I'm in my awesome fuel efficient Touareg 660, I can get that down to 30 minutes, 25 minutes sometimes.
Yeah,
Am I doing some questionably illegal things here in Austin? You know, that's between me and God, right? But like, I embody the European rider when I'm commuting back to work. I'll just leave it at that.
And yeah, I think all the granola eating, like hippie libs can handle it.
That's true. Yeah, here in Austin, everybody loves that
Everyone's
stuff.
pretty soft. Going out a little bit outside of the city would maybe be a little bit more risky, but. And similarly, you're filtering in lanes, dense urban areas, egalitarian motorcycle culture, that is gonna affect the types of bikes that are popular and commonly sold. In America, you're 19, you either get a liter bike or you get, a Harley Davidson, you get a Turbo Hayabusa.
Yeah.
Again, culture of excess and exuberance. And even if you are sensible and you start on a small bike, there's always this like...
It's a pressure.
Yeah, there's this, the power progression pressure, triple P, that is like omnipresent, right? Like you can be in your lane, figuratively, and loving the heck out of your bike, having a great time. It's perfect for everything you need, but people are constantly going to be in your ear. When are you upgrading? Unless you ride a Turbo Hayabusa or an H2, people are always going to be asking you, like, what's next? What are you getting? And yeah, and again, that I don't think that's as commonplace. And
I think it also falls under like America's kind of like consumerist attitudes about things of like, bikes here are treated as toys, and it's like you have one for a year, then you get another one, then you get another one, then you get another one. From what I've seen of European riders that I've known and talked to, you kind of get a bike and keep it for a little longer, especially if it's a utilitarian thing you use. If it doesn't need to do anything else, then just call it a day.
And what is actually like kind of a striking irony in the bike situation in Europe versus US. In the US, we love big, fast, powerful, sicko mode bikes, but the best racers come out of Europe, right?
Yeah, historically that wasn't always the case. We had a golden era in the 70s and 80s of American domination in MotoGP, or as it was called back then, the 500cc Grand Prix Championship. But yeah, in recent years, we're nowhere. We have not developed this kind of pipeline to get people into the sport, and it also just feels like a losing battle because there's so much more motorcycle culture over there. Unless we just magically all start riding more motorcycles here in the US, it kind of feels like, if you're gonna take it serious, you gotta go over to Europe.
Yeah, and I think it shows like there's a lesson to be learned, right? Like if you start slow, learn the right way, build the fundamentals, have respect for the craft and the machine and the pursuit of mastery, versus just going out and buying the fastest bike you can get approved for or like legally ride, you're gonna be better off for it. And I think it's interesting, in the US you have like drag racing, like salt flats, highway roll racing, like NASCAR,
monster truck jams. You know?
And it's almost more of a spectacle and more of a novelty, these kind of automotive events, whether they're racing or more performance or whatever you'd want to call Monster Jam, I don't even know. Exuberance. And is there anything to be said about, the history of racing in Europe, right? You're about to go to the Isle of Man.
That's true. Yeah, I'm heading over there, and yeah, I think there's just this beautiful, rich tradition of racing motorcycles in Europe. It kind of started in Europe, and I think there's a reason why in the Grand Prix calendar there's like 8 or 9 races in Europe, because that's where the epicenter of it really is.
Right. And yeah, just the contrast between what people are doing on the street, average riders, versus what people are doing on the racetrack. It's like it couldn't be a greater night and day difference.
Yeah. One place where I think America actually has Europe beat is our incredible public lands out west, and just our insanely huge and diverse landscapes and areas that we have. This is something that Europeans just like always just like seemingly forget. Like they only focus on like Nebraska roads and like, wow, America sucks. And I'm like, bro, like look at all these amazing adventure roads we have. Look at all this incredible scenery we have. It's just like, I don't know, like as good, if not, I've ridden in Europe and in America, and honestly, like mountains in Colorado, they're just as good as some of the Alps and stuff in Europe, like especially, out west. And yeah, like, you got the crazy switchbacks in the Alps, and like, it's a different vibe and feeling, you go up the Dolomites and you sip your little espresso. But, the adventure stuff we got here is really good.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's just a different experience, right? Yeah, like taking your Vespa through a 500-year-old city and getting an espresso, super sick, right? No one can have a bad time doing that. But it's completely different than going out west and doing some forest roads, or even, the Pacific Coast Highway, or these big US interstates, right? Like those are kind of unique to the United States. Interstates, they don't even have states in Europe.
No.
They got countries. But yeah, so like big interstates, high speeds, like kind of flat, but it's like, yeah, the scenery is crazy in a lot of different parts of the States. And then different bikes obviously are better suited for that type of riding. You know, that whole thing that we won't rehash, but CB750 which created this kind of street going super bike model, was made to excel in American roads, American highway systems, because it was faster, bigger, all this stuff. So riders may be less safe or more excessive, but at the end of the day, it kind of did a lot to shape the industry, kind of put a fire under Honda's ass a little bit, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, all I'm saying is, like, you could never see the likes of Exuberance in Europe. You know, you need American highway systems and exuberance for someone like him to exist.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why it's the culture of celebrity, the star system, all that stuff, a whole different conversation, a whole different video. But again, it all lends itself to the American experience. But yeah, I just thought it was we were having these conversations kind of behind the scenes, and I thought it would be fun to roll the camera and, bring the folks in.
Yeah.
Talk about this.
American riders, European riders. The one area I am a little jealous of you guys over there across the pond is they get a lot more models than we do. Yamaha comes out with like 3 or 4 different models that we just like simply don't get over here. There's like special edition Teneres, the XSR 900 GP, the Tracer 7. Like there's so many cool bikes that we just don't get.
Like the Tracer 7, I understand because
Tracer 9 exists. And
exactly.
So, like,
why would I get the 7 if I can get the 9? But the XSR 900 GP is a little confusing why we don't get that here. Maybe it's just too cool and trendy. They're like Americans, it doesn't have enough flames on it or eagles or something, I don't know. But
so we have many differences, but I'd like to believe that European riders and American riders can find more common ground than we think. Let me know in the comments down below if you're a Euro rider or if you're an American-only rider, such as Logan over here. Hopefully we can get him across the pond and experience some of the finer things in life. So those beautiful Swiss Alps, those espressos, those beautiful billiard-smooth Spanish roads as well. There's a lot to love over there.
As long as they speak English. I'm too old to learn a different language.
Oh, God. All right, boys. Thanks for checking out today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. Catch you later. Keep watching, Emmy!